Hello and welcome everybody to this screencast that I decided to record quite spontaneous, so I have no script prepared, but I thought about demonstrating the features of NgRx Ducks and how it really works, and therefore I choose a little application. It's just a counter application that is already built with NgRx, and I have written several articles about this or with this application already. And yeah, so this is a really vanilla NgRx, and I just want to try pulling in NgRx Ducks, and then I want to refactor the counter and maybe also the log monitor. So what is this application about? You can add a random number to it, and if the number is less than 4, then the log monitor generates an error message that the number should not, the number should not be greater than 5. So if you add more than 5 to the counter, then this log message is appearing here, and if I do this multiple times, then you can see that a list of messages is generated here. So basically what we are talking about is are two features. The one feature is the log monitor, and the other feature is the counter, where you can add random numbers or subtract by 5. Okay. How does this look like? We have a directory called store. Normally I put the store things all to the features. Please keep in mind this is just a demo project. I keep the structure as flat as possible just for demonstration purposes. So if you really want to have a look at how an NgRx project is structured in real life, you definitely should look up the NgRx documentation and the example application to see how the creators of NgRx actually recommend to structure the application. Okay, and here you can see, as I've already told you, that there is a counter and there is also a log monitor. And the counter consists of actions. There we have 4 actions for now, and then we have effects. Actually, there is one effect inside of the counter effect. Just let me adjust the screens a little bit. So, and as you can see, there is also the operator act is used here. It's I think it's quite not that official, but it's just used to wrap asynchronous tasks that may have errors, and you can model the error path and the happy path inside of this operator. So just as a short explanation. Then we have a reducer, where we can do all the fancy stuff with state mutation, and then we have some selectors where we can, here in the counter example, just select the current count from the store. Then there's just a file with the interface that defines the shape of the state slice here, and we have just an index, a barrel file that exports all the members of the counter slice. All the features, the counter as well as the logger, are registered in our action reducer map, and the action reducer map is called reducers. Here you can see that for the counter slice we have the counter reducer, for the logger we have the logger reducer, and finally reducers are registered in the store by passing them here into the store module for root. Now, as I said before, I just want to try to download NgRx Ducks and refactor the application to use NgRx Ducks, and then maybe we can have a look at how the shape of certain things look like. Maybe we can examine some benefits and or some pros and cons that we can discuss. Some trade-offs that may come with NgRx Ducks or may not. So I'm totally open. I do not know either what happens now in the next few minutes. So to bring in NgRx Ducks, I want to download the package. And therefore, I'm here in StackBlitz and NgRx Ducks now since version 9, and now we have the RC for NgRx Ducks because I will wait until NgRx also finally has published version 9, and then I will also publish the final version of NgRx Ducks. But until this, I will just stick with the RC candidate for NgRx Ducks. So the package is called NgRx Ducks/core now, and then I just want to install the latest version. So, and we have the first error, and I think it's very easy to fix that because I have no published version with a next tag on npm, so that was my fault. So if you just install it normally, then everything is working as expected, and you got the RC candidate version 2 here. All right, so now let's go on and have a look at the counter. Basically, what is the effect on the file structure that NgRx Ducks has is that counter reducer and counter actions are not there anymore. So they are totally replaced by something that we call what we call a facade. And before you switch off this video, because you now know, oh my god, facade, all this manually typed code and all the code duplication that goes hand in hand with facades, this is not what NgRx Ducks is about. NgRx Ducks really avoids having code duplication and sets a lot of things up behind the scenes. In fact, technically, you can just prove me wrong, but I would say technically it's really the facade pattern that is used. That's why I call it facade, but it has nothing to do with the NgRx facades or the talks that you may have already watched about facades, that they are not recommended. NgRx Ducks goes a different way here. So maybe I have a little marketing problem here because of the name, but I try just to explain things as I code them, and hopefully it does make also sense to you and it resonates with you as well. So I create a new file and I call it counter facade, and this is really about having a service again. Some developers who have seen NgRx Ducks, they tend to say, oh, now NgRx looks like NgXS, or it has somehow the same API. I think it's partly true. Lots of this comes maybe from because I have a similar naming for the decorators, because NgRx Ducks brings in a decorator that is called store facade, and I think NgXS has something like store or store config or something like this. And that's why if you are coming from NgXS, you might discover some things that are that you already know. So and the first thing that we want to import is the store facade, and therefore I just type this counter facade, and now I apply this decorator. So what does this decorator do? Actually, it's a replacement for @injectable. So this is the first task. So counter facade already takes care of that this class is registered in the IOC container of Angular. Second, store facade sets up some infrastructure that connects your service automatically with the store, that enables us to simply set up action dispatchers and also connect selectors with the store as well to directly produce consumable observables automatically based on selectors, actually. Okay, so, but for now, this is everything that we can do. And I just want to set up some other things first that we can use later on. So another two helpers that we want to have is first get actions, and the second one is get reducer. So NgRx Ducks is capable of generating the reducer automatically based on the members that you have inside of your counter facade. So if you want to have the counter reducer later on, you simply need to write get reducer, and get reducer expects some initial state and then the class token of your facade, and then NgRx Ducks takes care of generating the reducer function for you. And another point is, another point is that we also are capable of extracting the plain actions, the plain NgRx actions out of our facade. This is a feature that is quite handy when it comes to use these actions in our effects, but we will also discuss this a little bit later on. I just want to have the basic setup here ready. And now the fun part starts, that we have a look at our reducer and at our actions file, and then we will merge both of those files here inside of this counter facade. So what I see here is in the reducer file is first that we have our initial state here inline. So we can do this. I just want to make it a little bit more explicit. I say, okay, this is the initial state. And the initial state is just this. And I think we can also say it's of type counter state to have a little bit more type safety here. And what we also need is to import the counter state from our counter state TS file as well. So you will sometimes recognize that we have red underlines here. Sometimes it may be, the reason is that I do a lot of mistakes when I write. And sometimes I just notice that stack splits hang up somehow when it comes to discover the file relations. And very often when you just save the file and reload stack splits, then everything should be okay again. So, but this is just as a hint for you. If you see an error here, I think it shouldn't be a real error. Sometimes it's just a wrong. The UI is just not updated accordingly. Okay. So now we have our initial state, and now we can just have this initial state here inside of our get reducer file. Okay. Next thing is that we want to copy, maybe I do this, I just copy this to have some kind of reference, and then I can just do something like that to not be forced to jump too much between it. And then I want to do another thing. I want to have this add and subtract as well. And I think we also need a random add later on for our effect. And this foo, I think it's really just something that I just added for demonstration purposes. But we do not need it actually for our application. So, all right. Now you can see the relation here. So if we have an add action, we trigger this case reducer here on add. If we call the subtract action, we have this case reducer here with subtract. And in NgRx Ducks, it looks like the following. that you say, all right, I have an action that is add, and therefore we create a duck. A duck is actually the name of the refactoring pattern that I use for NgRx Ducks, so it's not an invention from me. Then the first argument that the create duck method expects is the action type. So, and in this case, this is really add value. So this is okay for now. So as you can see, the method is totally fine if you just pass one argument. This is because that you can just create a simple duck with the action type, and you can use it to just dispatch an action without any payload to an effect, for example. But in this case, add also does a state mutation directly, and therefore we want to have this method here with state and count. And therefore we just need to provide a property, a case reducer that takes a state. In our case, it's a counter state. And then we also expect a payload, and in our case, this should be of type number. Okay, and then we can just inline this, and then we should have something like that. Okay, so let's see what we have done. So what we have achieved is we merged the declaration of the action that we can find here with the case reducer. So now it looks somehow like a command handler. It expects or it waits for this action being dispatched, and if this action is dispatched, this case reducer is executed accordingly. As you can see, I think I made a little mistake here because the payload is not of type number. As you can see here, payload has somehow here also a value property, and we should match this here as well. Okay, and as I said before, we won't have any code duplication here, because this definition that you can see here, how the payload is defined here, this is taken by the NgRx Ducks library automatically, and it sets up an action creator for you that expects exactly this type. So if we do everything correctly, we should be able to just throw out the store dependency from our container components later on, inject this service, and then we should be already ready to go without having any contract changes. All right, so we've done this for add. Now let's just go on and do this for the subtract method. And I feel very confident this evening. That's why I just do copy paste. And I think it's something like that we now need to subtract something. And I think this is .value, and here the TypeScript compiler has already recognized that we have the wrong type. Now we do this, and let's just as I see now, the create action actually does not has any let's just wait a moment. Sorry, it's totally fine. We have here the payload value. I've just looked at the wrong action creator, and I just was looking for the case reducer, and the case reducer is here above. But this looks also good for now. Okay, and then we have a last one, and this is this random add, this random add action. And I can just copy that, and random add is really just an action that triggers an effect, and it has no case reducer. And I just can copy, create action, and replace action with duck. And then this should be fine. Now I have an action dispatcher created for my random add. And this is how we can merge actions and reducer functions into one file. And now NgRx Ducks is capable of generating the reducer automatically. And now you may have also an idea why this is so easy. getReducer just iterates over each member of this facade, looks if there is a case reducer present, and if yes, then it just has a little lookup table, and if an action is dispatched, this reducer function looks if the type is known, and if there is a known type with a reducer, that reducer is executed. So it's fully Redux behind the scenes as well. I just take advantage of the data structure that I built up here and make things a little bit easier for you. And I also do not have such nesting that you already get with this create reducer function. Generally speaking, I haven't anything against nested arrow functions or something like this. I just figured out that in bigger projects where things get a little bit more complicated, those reducer functions aren't that easy that we have it here in our demo. And then it's a little bit better to have just plain functions. So you can also imagine you can just extract this inline method here into an external function, and then you're fine. You have really good readable code. And this was somehow also the motivation to do it like this with these properties here. And yeah, that's basically it. Okay, so now our reducer has finished, and now we want to replace our or now we want to use this facade in the rest of our application. The first thing that I want to do is to replace the reducer function. Therefore, I go to the action reducer map declaration here, and we already have this counter reducer, but now I do not want to have it from counter. I really will do an explicit import here. I want to have it from counter facade, just to make it obvious that we now exported from another file. It's a little better to see later on. Okay, and now I need to also re-import the counter state. So just want to split it up for now, and then this should be fine. I just reload the editor just to make sure that I did everything right, and the errors are gone as well. And as you can see, the app is still working, and this is just because we just have replaced the counter reducer, and this proves that the reducer that is generated by NgRx Ducks is exactly the same when you just use a reducer that you have written with vanilla NgRx. And the actions are also compatible with each other because we just copied the action types, right? And that's why this is working as well. So subtract is not working for now. We will just see it in a moment, maybe why this stopped working. And if I have made a mistake, then we will see this as well. So now, since our counter facade is ready, and I have already discovered the mistake here, we have this add value. I said before I am very confident in copy pasting code today. Okay, so this just proved me wrong. Okay, and now our application is already working. Subtract by 5 is already working as expected. Nice. Now we can go ahead into our containers, and since we have a facade for counter, I want to use this in our simple counter component. And for now, this has this store here, And the store also dispatches actions, and it also selects actions. So let's take care for the writing actions, so the dispatches first. And therefore, I just want to go first to the imports, and I want to bring in my counter facade by getting it from counter facade TS file. And now I want to just import it as a private member. I call it counter facade, and it is a counter facade. Okay, so let's see. I definitely need to add this counter directory here, I believe. Okay, and now we can replace our store dispatches with just plain methods that are coming from our let's say that is coming from our facade. And as you can see, I started with the add method. Of course, we need to have random add. But what I want to emphasize here is if you have add and dispatch, you have totally type safety by default by the declaration that you have done in your facade definition, because we have said that the payload needs to be an object of that has a value and a number. This dispatch method here that sits on top of the property add really expects you to have this shape, and only then you are able to dispatch the action. So NgRx Ducks also gives you fully type safety, which is kind of nice. But what we now want to do is to have this random add, and then this should be fine. And as you can see, if you hit the dot on the facade, you automatically get all the members that you can use. This also adds a very good discoverability, what you actually can do with your state slice here. All right, so now let's copy again. And now we want to subtract, and we dispatch the action for that, and therefore we dispatch the action with the right object shape. So once again, if I would do something like, when I try something creepy, this should not work. That's very interesting. But as you can see, the type checking of the editor hung up, unfortunately. I just try to reload it. Let's see if things go better now. Maybe for the next video I will use VS Code, but now you can see after reload you see that we have full type check. Of course we cannot do invalid stuff with it, so NgRx Ducks works as expected here. This is it. So this is how we can add this counter facade. So, and once again, for you as a user of this facade, you do not really know that there is something like Redux in the background. You only rely on the contract that you have messaging in place. And therefore we use this dispatch method here. And even if you onboard new developers to your project that are not familiar with the Redux or all Redux internals or NgRx internals, they are, I'm pretty sure that they are able to use an Angular service by just calling a method, and then the type checking also guides them to have the result that they would also expect later on. Okay. Now let's do another replacement, and this is in the effects. So for now, we have these actions imported here by counter actions, and now we can take advantage of the actions that we can extract from our facade already. I want to do it by have really these counter actions, and I import them from counter facade. And now we should be able to call, oh, sorry, just copied the wrong thing here, but now do something like that. And I really just have replaced this with the, prefix this with counter action, and you see it really works as before and has the same shape as before. So we do not need to touch anything else. You just have changed the path of it. And now something interesting happens. So I just want to try to format the document a bit. It works very nice. And you can see here that TypeScript now complains. As you can see, we now call counteractions.add without the dispatch action. In our component, we use dispatch to actually dispatch the action. But if you call add directly and use the method of add, it just then is the action creator. And NgRx Ducks relies on run simple contract, and NgRx Ducks really sets up this payload property for an action automatically behind the scenes to really just have to be sure that each action has a payload, and this payload has just different types based on the state slices and actions that you use. So, and this means that we just need to remove this payload property here because NgRx Ducks use this behind the scenes. And once again, TypeScript already informed us about this mismatch, and it was also just a simple change to make. And it already simplified our code here in this case a little bit. So just try to do some creepy manually reformatting. So yeah, and it works. Okay, so let's check if this is still working, and it is not working anymore. Okay, now, so subtract is working, but add random is not working anymore. So now let's check why this is the case. I just reload the application. And now we have random add, and you can see random add actually is an action creator. And you see that this type is also coming from NgRx. So NgRx Ducks has not its own action implementation. It really uses NgRx vanilla actions. So, but the fact is that our application is somehow broken. So first I want to check if my application is set up as expected, and it turned out it's not. So I only use the action creator here. I actually do not dispatch any action, and that's why I just need to use dispatch here. So, and now you can see that the app is already working as before. And what we can now do is deleting this file. We delete reduces file, so we only have this facade. And then we just delete those files from the index.ts. And now we can see that 2 files are gone, replaced with 1 file, and it works. Okay. Let's have a look at the counter component. So there is still the store here, and there is a principle. There is the Redux principle that the store is a single source of truth, and this should not be broken by anything. And so let me adjust these here as well. And what is this count about? Count is the selector. Okay, you take care of this yet in a moment. So so store is a single source of truth. Yeah, and if you do everything right, the store is really the only API in your application, in an NgRx application, that you really need to set up communication and read data from the store. And now we have two dependencies again, the store and the counter facade. But literally, the fact is that the counter facade is also able to read data from the store, not only to dispatch actions, but also to read data. And now I want to show you how you can do this as well. In your facade, you can hook up your selectors with the counter facade. Therefore, I import all the selectors from my counter selectors file. Hopefully this is correct. And now I want to say bring in another member here, and I will bring in another helper of NgRx Ducks called bind selectors. And I can just say select bind selectors, and then I just pass selectors into it. And so now we have, maybe you just need to reload the file once more. Let's see if we did everything right. Yeah, it is working. Okay, so far so good. We haven't touched selectors. It's still the same. We just have added them somehow to our facade. Let's see how our counter facade has changed, or which abilities have been added. So instead of assigning this via store pipe and select, I now say this dot counter facade dot select dot count. And I can remove, I just leave it here as a comment for the moment, and I can remove was it wrong? So this is what I wanted. And as you can see, our application, and for safetiness, for sanity check, I just reload the page again. So the selector really is responsible for displaying and updating the values here. So, or binding the values and that they are updated accordingly. And this is still working. And the cool thing about the NgRx Ducks facade is that it is capable of taking a memorized selector of NgRx, and it just sets up this boilerplate here, store pipe select behind the scenes. And one thing about the usage of those selectors, you have an observable stream here, and it is not recommended now to compose multiple selectors with the streams here in the component. Please do all the aggregation of your data still with the selectors as the NgRx team already recommends it. You can totally combine multiple selectors with each other, get one slice of the data from one part of the store and then from the other part of the store. You can aggregate them, and then you can just do it like here. For example, let's just introduce a new counter or new count selector. Let's call it count crazy, and it's create. And then we can create a selector with our NgRx, and we just use the count selector that we already have here, and then we say count plus 10 or times 10. So hopefully this is correct. So we need to pass the selector first, and then we have a projection function. Now we have this count crazy selector. And now one of the beautiful things happened that I really like about NgRx Ducks. I just touched one file, and you remember that facade really can read every selector. And now here in the component file, we automatically get the second selector. And this really serves the open-close principle, or the single responsibility principle, that the counter facade somehow brings back. The counter facades responsibility is to bundle this decentralized setup that is caused by the Redux pattern. And it really helps you to not touching multiple files just to get one thing done. So imagine that you have this count crazy selector just with NgRx vanilla. Then you need to import this selector again over here, and then you can exchange it here or set up another store pipe line to just use the selector, and the facade really automatically is updated by just by bringing in the selector in the counter selector file. And this is the thing that I really like, and each other developer in your team, since she or he has pulled your changes, automatically gets the auto completion and knows, okay, my colleague has done something cool thing, and I do not have to re-implement this because I've just missed the information that it's already there. And this is the thing that I really like, and we just can use this kind of crazy to check if this is working. And yeah, it seems like that it really, it just uses the count and multiplies it by 10. Okay, so this is basically it. Just a small recapitulation, or the last thing that I want to do is we can now remove the store service from here. We can remove add NgRx store. We do a last reload to get rid of the TypeScript errors in our imports. And now something interesting happened as well. Your component only relies on the contract that it uses observable streams, and that messaging is used behind the scenes as well. But there is no knowledge about that there is Redux or MobX or stateful services or something like that. It really just relies on RxJS streams, and that to do a state change, some message is dispatched to somewhere. As I said before, normally if you use NgRx Ducks, you also do not need any NgRx or NgRx Ducks dependency in your component file. And you end up really having just one service that is capable of selecting and dispatching things. Sometimes you will find out that you need to use maybe selectors from other counter facade services, but this does not necessarily mean that you need to inject all those counter facade services. I just show you shortly what this means. This is the last feature for today. If you go into the counter facade, there's another progressive enhancement that is called, we call it pick in NgRx Ducks. So like the duck can pick. So let's just reformat this, and pick really, pick really just needs to be assigned to be this method here. And once again, this method is just a little boilerplate code, and store facade will then connect this method to the store to be able to make all these, to pass the selectors and to transform them into observable streams. And now if you really want to access another selector, let's check if our logger has selectors. I think so. Yeah, our logger has this info message selector. Let's try this out. Let's try this out. We would just want to use the info message selector from logger selectors. And therefore I just do this to go to loggers, and I want to have this, have I copied that? This info message, yeah. And now I want to, I'm not really sure what the outcome is of the selector. Just guess it, being a string array. Now we can say this counter facade dot pick, and pick now expects to have to get a memoized selector. So, and now, yeah, you can see that pick automatically infers the types, and we get this string array back. And now we should be able to take messages and just do something like this here, having messages, pipe it with the async pipe, and then log it out. And now, for now, it's empty. And now, yeah, and now if I have a violation here in my rule set, I automatically get this same information here. And this is how you can read data from other state slices very simply by just using the pick helper there. Okay, this is everything for today. I will put the link to this StackBlitz file here into the description, so you can check out the code samples and you can play with it. Let me know what you think about the API. Actually, if you have any ideas or concerns with it, maybe, please don't hesitate and file an issue on GitHub, and then we can talk about it. So thank you very much and have a nice day.